Anyway, you know.
I'd be on strike as a Hollywood star.
You won't get on strike.
Actually, I was just, we're just looking
We're
at
having a guided tour by Bernard.
that I was going to chase, you know, Rivers Trust Bank actually.
Right.
And it's work that he's doing on the Trent and Mersey. It was done in 1886, so I
Wow.
just wondered if the work had been done yet.
Has it?
No, actually, I think I've sent it once. I've just been copying the second page, and it's an engineer's report. Oh, it's done two on me. Engineer's report. But you see, I've got the original photo. I've got the original carbon copies. And of course, it was when the North Staffordshire Railway owned the navigation.
Right.
Because when the North Staffordshire Railway Company started, the owners of the canal panicked. Ah, we're going to take all our business, we'll get sacked. So actually they approached the directors of the North Staffordshire Railway and said, look lads, and they were all lads in those days,
Yeah.
rather than getting in competition, shall we do an amalgamation?
I
And so
didn't
they
know
did.
that.
Yeah, they did. So actually, they were never in competition because from day one, they actually formed a joint company and said, well, it'll give a better service, make more money if we work together.
Yeah.
So this is why I've got stuff here, which is, I mean, that's LMS, but this one is North Staffordshire Railway and Trent and Mersey Navigation. And it's offering a job to someone.
Alright.
Whether he got it or not, 1840. So I don't know if he got it. I don't remember him working in a long year, do you?
Amazing, you've got
Nobody
this.
writes like that anymore. My grandma used to write like
But
that.
you can read it.
Yeah.
If I wrote it, you wouldn't have a clue.
Let's get a picture
Um,
of it.
I thought you read.
Because I've volunteered myself because there was no event for the next steaming, which at the end of the month, there was no event.
Yeah.
So Clever Clogs here got a call from a guy who comes along with a miniature ride-down railway. So I said, okay, if you want to come and set it up to in here and as far towards the warehouse you can get it, you won't get it all the way. And I thought, well, if I set up a sort of railway, because it's 100 years this year since the North Staffordshire Railway was amalgamated in the LMS,
Alright.
Andertons and all these.
Right.
And so from there was a railway up to, I always say to Tesco's.
Oh, Tesco's.
But the idea was the same,
Yeah.
to connect with the factories and shops in Hanley with the canals.
Yeah. Oh, dear. Sarah uses this place, doesn't she, for explorers sometimes?
Well, we do events with schools, as you know, with Sarah.
Yeah.
And obviously it's gone quiet now.
Yeah.
But we do some, and we do joint visits with her, and then we normally for the kids do, she organises with one of her volunteers or two, if she can get them, a canal walk, and also some event in the warehouse, like make a lock or make a canal.
This is tour.
Right, let's just do it. This is a fairly brief one. If I'm doing an outreach or a group is booked in, I do a longer one. Okay, so let's do bone to bone china a little bit. What have we got on site? We've got the Roland Flint mill. We've got an 1820 beam engine. Because when it was built, Mr. Shirley obviously bought a second-hand engine. He must have been short of money. We've got the two canals and the locks, which you know more about. And then we've still got the forge on the left, the Canals and Rivers Trust building, and then the warehouse and jack office. A ball mill, which is later technology, and on the field, the first hospital in Stoke-on-Trent, which are those two buildings,
Yeah.
built in 1803, lasted till 1816, and then it was so polluted, if you weren't ill when you went in, you were ill when you came out. So they moved to a much posher hospital and bigger to grow, and became eventually part of the gasworks.
Yeah.
The first gasworks. Okay. The other thing I do with people, with the kids, and slightly fuller one is where we are, because people don't know where we are. But that's just, you know where we are, you found us. Dimatra Poetry. If you recall, when you were at school, I don't know if you're historians or not,
No.
you did explorers in the 1500s, going out from Europe to the Indies, China, North America, South America, the West Indies, because ship technology was improving. So we all heard of Columbus and the Gama and all these characters. And they started to bring back things we didn't know about in Europe, such as tobacco, potatoes,
Yeah.
and also silks, spices, but also coffee,
Tea and sugar.
chocolate, tea and sugar. Tea, although it was introduced in the UK in the early 1600s, it was popularised when Catherine of Braganza married Charles II in 1662 from memory. I wasn't there, but and the Portuguese were ahead of us, the French. The Germans were never very into it. The Italians were quite ahead with exploring. And it was well established tea drinking within Portugal, especially the Portuguese court. So what Meghan Markle does, Catherine Braganza does, you find others want to do, and the exams are exactly the same.
Yeah.
I got Meghan in, I got Kate in,
Yeah.
because the principles are precisely the same, and I've got real examples of it. And so it became popular. The other thing is, in Europe at that time, the population was starting to go up from about the 1650, 1700.
Right.
But also the lower upper classes and the upper middle classes were getting richer.
Right.
If you were a decent tradesman, you could earn a better living, housing was better, so you wanted nicer things in your houses. And therefore, we started going to Costa, didn't we? As men. And the coffee shop started in the really 1600s, where banking started and insurance in the modern era. And also, you young ladies, I'm sure you and Sarah do all the time, in afternoons have tea parties in your crinolines. Us men may get invited if we could, and we behave ourselves. So, in fact, there was a whole social scene built around teas, coffees, chocolates, because other than coffee shops you get tea and chocolate, and you need the sugar because it was pretty bitter then, the chocolate and the coffee. But actually, let's get rid of him, I don't want him. Actually, a little bit exaggerated, but in Europe, pottery it had been made for thousands of years, but it was still a bit rough. I mean, that mug on the end would have been good quality. You were getting a better type of ware, such as the brown wares, where you went into the 1600s. But, that was a piece of 16 Staffordshire jug, which was made out of brown clay and slip. That's a Wealden, I think, from Fenton. But what we really wanted was to have Chinese porcelain, especially served by nice young ladies. I don't think we got the young ladies in this country, but the East India Company and the Dutch East India Company were importing from China. They also imported some stuff from India and Japan especially, but it was really China where we got the trading, and it was the Chinese who were the best at it. Nice tea sets and dinner services. It was very expensive because one, it was expensive to produce, and two, transport cost was horrendous. No Suez Canal to all come around the Cape. So we've got the upper classes could probably afford the Chinese porcelain. The middle classes wanted it, and never mind about us lot. Okay, now it's pretty obvious that that sort of ware is made out of the local brown clays.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
And in fact, if you dig up anywhere around here, and lots of places in England, I'm coming to you,
Oh, all right.
you find you've got brown clays. That's Etruria marl.
Right.
Okay? But for making posh pottery, they knew they needed white clays. Right?
Cornish Chinese clay, yeah.
Yeah. Now, there is some in Shelton. It's a bit more creamy.
Right.
They did find it just down the road here. But the big deposits are in Cornwall and Devon in this country, around Limoges in France, in the Saxony area of Germany. And of course, in China, they've got the mountains. And one of the mountains is called Kaolin. Kaolin?
Yeah.
Yes. I can't pronounce Chinese, so it doesn't matter. So that's what they knew they wanted. But on its own, like most clays, it's pretty useless. So, in fact, in China, they put what's called China stone in, which you dig up,
Right.
and that makes the Chinese porcelain. Okay? But it's quite a process with a very high firing temperature. But you can get your best Ming.
That's the Ming.
No.
No.
Not. I can't read it. I mean, Chinese people and say, what does it say? And they say, no idea.
Right.
And of course, it's translucent.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, yeah.
Okay? So you've got white, you've got decoration and translucency.
Yeah.
Right. So, in, for instance, Germany and Saxony, they were putting two types of clay and, was it quartz? I think it was in
Could be
to make
quartz.
a porcelain.
Yeah, would be.
Feldspars, quartz, I think they used quartz. In this country, they started to put flint.
Right.
Ah, flint, yeah.
Okay? Now, flint is very hard, as you know.
Yeah.
Oh, you can feel it if you want to. Okay.
Yeah.
So, in fact, you need to process it. And that's what we do here. We're the dirty people. We don't make posh pottery. Go to Wedgwoods or Gladstone or Middleport, they're posh. We're not. So what do you do to process it? Well, you first of all take it up to 900 to 1000 degrees centigrade for a few hours, and the flint crumbles and starts to go white.
Right.
Okay? And then you get
Still
It
more.
makes you wonder how we discover all this, doesn't
a lot of trial and error,
it?
a pestle and mortar.
Yeah.
Now actually, with the stone in China, and actually here, you don't have to calcine it, but you hammer it.
Yeah.
And they had people in China literally with hammers. And also tilt hammers, not tilt hammers or driven off a water wheel.
Oh, see, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
With cams on.
Yeah, yeah.
So basically imagine you've got your mortar, slightly bigger than this. She wouldn't make many cups and saucers grinding in this. And you pounded it. And in fact, Wedgwood, I've got a nice picture of his pounder, which was a big tree trunk with a stone on it.
Yeah.
And then passed it through a fine sieve, normally made of hair. I don't know what hair, whether it's human hair or horse hair.
Oh, so I don't know.
And that's fine. But the problem is it's extremely dusty, the process. And the dust gets on your chest and gives you silicosis,
You don't
or
find
the proper medical name is potter's rot.
Yeah.
Okay? And you last 2 years if you're lucky, and 3 if you're unlucky, because you probably want to die anyway. 1728, well, a bit before that actually, a year or two before, there was a painter and decorator working at Trentham Hall, you know Trentham Gardens?
Yeah.
Lodging in Newcastle. Now I make this bit up. I think he was in the pub with potters, because there was potteries in Newcastle, of course, at that time. You don't think of it, but there were, and I mean this Newcastle, the proper one.
Man, you can't live in
Not
Newcastle.
those silly people up north.
Proper Newcastle.
And he obviously was aware of the health hazards. Well, in those days, if you're a painter and decorator, you couldn't go to B&Q and get a tin of Dulux. You mixed your own pigments. And he knew that when he mixed pigments, he wet ground. Put the material in, whatever the pigment colour, cobalt or whatever, water in, and then ground it. So he patented in 1828 a process, well, he didn't quite patent it then, whereby you get your calcine material, put it in the pan, put water, and initially had sort of big ball bearings to run round,
Yeah.
which didn't work very well because you grind a bit off and then it gives you flecks of black and white ware. But he then did another patent in 1732 where he replaced it by boulders of a material very close to flint. Can't really use flint because you can't get big pieces of flint. Flint tends to come in smaller pieces. There's something called chert, which is very close to flint in its chemical composition, very hard. And he found, if you rub these round, it gives you a grind. You can then run it off, dry it, and you get a
Is that
material
the fine?
like that.
The fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, if you mix by weight, about, because there's different weights, different mixes, half and half, you get something that's improved, and Mr. Wedgwood made a lot of money by developing into creamware or queensware, which is a great improvement. And it's called queensware because he managed to attract Queen Charlotte, George the second or third's wife, third I think, and she bought it. And then of course Queen Catherine the Great of Russia, Empress, said, well, if she's got some, I want some.
Yeah.
And they ordered 1,000 pieces dinner service, which nearly drove him poverty. Flint became important. So that is not quite Wedgwood, but it is a creamware.
Yeah.
We call it ironstone at times. That's Burley.
Yeah.
But very similar. But
Not translucent, lucent. No.
No. Oh.
but that was a great improvement.
Yeah.
And people bought that, and it really put Stoke-on-Trent on the map very much. And just to show the importance, that's a map of 1879. We are there. All
Yeah.
these are Flint mills.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that.
about 1.5 mile, sorry, 1.5 miles by a mile. Every town has got Flint mills. It was important. Now, if you go along the canal, you know what a canal is. About 10 miles, you come to Cheddleton Flint.
Yeah.
That was one of the early technologies. They were old-fashioned there because they used a water wheel.
Yeah.
And our friend Mr. Brindley worked with Benson to develop the milling. Because before he was messing about these silly canals, he was trained as a wheelwright and millwright.
Right.
So for the first 20 years of his life, he was a mill engineer, and he built a nice business up. Initially working for a bloke in Macclesfield, and then opened his own. When the guy died, he wound the business up, finished the work, wound the business up, opened his own place in Leek, and built the flour mill in Leek, which is still there. But also sold a lot of work with Flint mills, so opened a sub-branch in Burslem, as you do, and his reputation was made on designing water mills, but he did design a couple of windmills, one of which he put in Burslem for the Wedgwoods, not Josiah, his uncles,
Right.
Richard, I think it was Richard, or John Wedgwood, I think. But it was very much Benson and Brindley, and with two potters whose names I've forgotten, developed that basic process to a process that was adopted by the potters. So now where do you get the flint from? Well, south coast and the north coast of France, Normandy. So with a nice job for Anne-Marie. It is Anne-Marie, yes. No, it isn't Anne-Marie,
Julianne, yeah.
Julianne.
Close.
Julianne. As a flint picker. Because these are postcards from about 1900 of ladies in Normandy gathering stones off the beaches, taking them to the sorting yard, sorting the flints out and presumably other materials, and then they could be transported by coastal shipping, A lot of it came from New Haven actually, on the south coast, and all the other town I never remember. And then of course, they've got to come up to Stoke-on-Trent.
Yeah.
Well, in those days, you could come up to Liverpool with the little ship, up to Hull, put it on the Trent, but the Trent was only navigable to round about Burton-on-Trent.
Yeah.
So then, the roads were you think they're bad now, they were terrible in those days. So the only thing you could do was use a back horse. Couldn't use a horse and cart. Roads were so bad. So then you got a back horse, which shows why the canals were so important.
Yeah.
Without the canals, we couldn't have grown the industry within Stoke, because we're getting materials from Cornwall, Devon, the south coast of England and Normandy.
Yeah.
So, as well as shipping stuff out, it was more important to me to get it in, because if you couldn't get it in, you can't make it, so you weren't allowed to ship out.
Yeah.
And I think people lose sight of that. They say, oh well, canals are nice and smooth, so you didn't break away. Quite right. But let's get the materials in first. I reckon you need about 250 back horses to carry what one moderate canal boat can carry. Now I don't know how many people you need to look after 250 horses, but bear in mind you've got to get them in the morning, feed them, put the panniers on, put the load on, lead them, stop at a pub at lunchtime and feed them. At night you've got to take the load off, check them, feed them, put them to bed. I don't know. Canal boat, 2 people, 1 horse.
Yeah.
You see the increase in efficiency in transport. So that really is so important. Now then, okay, so we've got our materials here. Knuckle of cows,
Right.
cattle, get them in the slaughterhouse. And you do exactly the same. You calcine it, take it up to 900 or 1,000, right? Properly crush it and then grind it in your pestle and mortar. And then, if you put together roughly quarter flint, quarter clay and half bone, you get a material that will make something like that.
Yeah.
That's Wedgwood about turn of this century.
Is it?
Last century, sorry.
Yeah.
So, it was really Josiah Spode in Stoke, but we actually credited reluctantly with Thomas Fry from the Boat Pottery in London and the stuff in the V&A made by him. But really it was Spode just took it to what I call a production process. He also started his steam engine, and that has a huge effect. So there we are. So there's our bone china. You know why it's called bone china now?
Yeah, we know that.
I knew bones ready, but I didn't know. You know.
Didn't know it was from the
That's
cow.
basically. Now I'm giving you very basic formulas. Every pot would have his own, because you vary depending on what you're making, your own whim, you know, you wear. But there we are. So that mix gives you a clay. The one I've missed out is when you get the bone from the slaughterhouse, it's got meat and marrow fat, so you boil it, and that's a stinky process.
Yeah.
And going back to our flint mill, I believe Brindley did make the North Mill there for flint grinding, and they also calcined there. So that basically is where we are. Now then, coming to this site, I'll take to the model in a minute, but this site became important when the canals were built, because Wedgwood made sure it came through here and into his factory, which is just down the canal. And as you know, the Trenton Nose was fully opened in 1777, although used before that, as you opened the stretch, Huntington used it and got the money.
Yeah.
Called in 1778, and obviously this land, any land by the canal, became quite important for building factories. Hence we got the factory. And just to finish off a little bit here, we told it produced about 80 to 100 tonnes of material a week. Now, that's bone. Make 2,500 cups, 5,000 plates, 2,500 cups. It was dusty work, but never mind. And we are, as far as we know, are the only remaining operational steam-driven or steam-powered potter's mill in the world.
Right.
We're a scheduled monument, so we're on the part of Windsor Castle or Stonehenge.
Yeah.
Great historically buildings in a conservation area. So wipe your feet before you
Oh, wow.
Right, now then,
That's amazing.
does that help?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Can you entertain my son? He's a darn nuisance. And I said, yeah, no problem. Liz, send him down. The only person who's steam for special.
Is he?
Yeah, but you would, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Right, so that's a model. Don't know who made it. No one seems to know who made it. It says 1930s, but it wouldn't be much different in the 1860s.
No.
Basically, you've got the Trent and Mersey.
Yeah.
Where Julian
Oh,
is.
yeah.
Okay. You've got the Calden.
Holden, yeah.
Okay. Now, a couple of things. The Trent and Mersey, as I mentioned, was fully opened in 1777. Hare Castle Tunnel's over there.
Yeah.
Wedgwood Factory somewhere there. Notice, I'm preaching to converted now, but I'll say what I say to people, because even now people don't always realise it. That stretch from that lock, the summit lock.
You've got two walls.
Hello.
That's
Hello.
Bernard, so
It's okay.
That's the highest part. So the Calder, which is about, I mean, the Trent is about 96 miles long? Calder's about 20 odd miles long. And it's three functions. One, to bring general goods up and down. Second, to bring limestone down from Calden quarries, which are still active, of course. And the third, most important, is of course the feeder canal to top the Trent and Mersey.
Yeah.
Because the first year it opened, the Calden wasn't open, they didn't run out of water.
Oh, really?
So I wouldn't fancy going to Mr. Wedgwood and saying, no, I'm ever so sorry, we can't get you good, can't get your raw materials in because the canals run out of water. As you know, it's fed from three pools, well mainly, Stanley Pool, Knowsley Pool, and then they were running out of water about 1810, wasn't it? Where the down the river Derwent and made Rudyard Lake.
Can I ask you a question, Bernard? So you know when you go to Frogwell Basin and you've got all the kind of got all,
Lime kilns.
was the canal built just to get that from there to here?
Yes, but also to bring water down
Yeah. Okay.
from Stanley Pool. It was extent, as far as I know, it was dual or three purposes. But yes, they needed that limestone because limestone you need for lime water,
Yeah.
which we still have to use and all now. Smelting of iron, so the iron industry was developing, nature flux, and then agricultural revolution was on, and you use it on fields
Yeah.
to alter the pH.
Yeah.
So you've got a junction. It's just like a motorway junction or a rail junction.
Yeah.
You want your maintenance units.
Yeah.
So all this was Canal's maintenance unit. So you've got the gauging dock, which is still there. Have you seen it?
We're
I'll
walking
take
up
him
now.
that way
You
now.
have to climb around the fence
Yeah.
unless the gate's open or you can get a key.
Yeah.
But it's a big strong lad.
I'll show you the
Climb around
buildings
fence.
anyway.
The roof's gone, but the weights are still there. And of course it was also a dry dock. But you'd put known weights on,
Yeah.
and then you could see the displacement. So when you went through a toll office, which I can show you actually, then you knew to got 30 tonnes of, say, coal, sixpence a tonne. We've got the warehouse we use, but it was originally, we believe, for storing spare parts for boats and canals. That's what we assume,
Yeah.
not goods. The roof's gone and the check office has gone, but that was the check office taking tolls on the Trent and Mersey and
Yeah.
that one for the Calden. Because the wall now built wasn't there, there's a wall
Yeah.
there now,
Yeah.
and that wasn't there. Then, of course, we've got the Canals and Rivers Trust Yard.
Well, I had my job interviewing there.
That's right. All been rebuilt over the years, but basically on the pattern that I think it was originally. Different bridge because Hitler didn't like the design of it, and he actually blew some of the roofs off as well. So different bridge. And then, of course, we've got what was a blacksmith shop, forge and farriers. So for shoeing the horses and making metal parts for the boats and the logs.
Right.
So all that was not Canals and Rivers Trust, but part of the maintenance unit for the canals. And of course you're still covered from Worcester up to Harecastle and the Calder.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
In fact, one or two of the guys working there are originals from 17.
Seem like it
I think they
sometimes.
were. What's his time? So that shows the importance of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, of course, and inherited from his stepdad.
Right.
Because John Bourne had bought some of the land by then. The around Canal Arm, we assume, was built earlier when there was a chemical or colour works there. So all that was built and worked from 1857 to 1972. Okay, this part was gradually modernised. That closed in 1972 that is.
Yeah.
Was then recognised by a chap from the museum in Hanley as being possibly or probably the only remaining operational steam driven mill in the world. So he got it scheduled as a scheduled monument. Want to build a museum around it, but of course the council said we'd no money. So he appealed for volunteers who met first in 1978. I still meet every Thursday night. Two of the originals are still with me.
How long have you been here?
Oh, I'm a new boy. I've been here 12 years.
Oh, really?
I'm new. Unless you've been here since 1980. So it had been left just locked up because there were other jobs on site. And there was another site where you're standing, Julianne, across the canal. So they restored it to working condition. This back part ran till 2014. Still grinding
Right.
bone, other materials, but modernised. In 2014, Jesse Shirley's eventually went out of business. The site was for sale. This part was rented to the City Council. And we then, as a charity, bought the mill, still with the lease to the council. So we actually own the mill, but lease it to the council.
I see.
Hence my moans and groans.
Really?
Awful.
I used to work for him.
This was bought by a builder who used it for his builder's yard and he's turned it into an industrial estate. But most of these buildings have got the chimneys there and there's a bit of that office, but the rest were modernised over the years. This was a canal, that's our car park.
Yeah.
That was a canal basin with the warehousing and then the tramway up to Hanley.
Can I ask them, because Taz asked me that. But you don't need an exact date.
I think late 90s or early 2000s.
Oh, so it's
I
not.
got a video of it being erected.
Oh, so it's not an old historic bridge or
No,
anything.
it was a lift bridge.
Right.
Oh, super. Made out of solid wood.
Oh, I saw some of them when I was storeroom when we were cleaning Birmingham.
Well, they were donated by a lady, she's from 1996, but she phoned me the other night. Oh, my canal boat's all right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, you appreciate this, Bernard.
It's a normally used site, totally.
Yeah. Still raining. I thought maybe you'd stop the rain forward by the time we've done this.
So the bridge obviously wasn't here, that's the original.
Yeah.
You can see just go there. And then you've got the sluice for keeping the cauldron level.
Yeah.
If it gets too high, it comes down here and runs into the transmitter.
I see. Just a little stand, is it right?
Right. So This is a flint kiln. So basically, if you calcine flint, you mix it with coal. That pan's obviously empty, left empty on purpose.
Yeah.
And then you'd start it at the bottom with paper and sticks, presumably, and build up the layers. And then this chimney is called a hovel,
Right.
and this gives you
Hovel.
the draft
Yeah.
to get the temperature. And the bone kilns, we're told were very similar, but they were lost years ago.
Yeah.
So this was used up to the 1930s, we believe. And when you look at the bottle kiln, of course, you don't look at the kiln, you look at the hovel. The kiln moves inside.
Yeah.
Okay.
Superb.
And it wouldn't be wooden doors because they burn up.
Steel doors, right?
During COVID, because we were in Denmark, pigeons got in, and you couldn't get them out. I tried them on the way.
Yeah.
You know, my volunteers wouldn't climb up there. I don't know why.
Yeah, of course you would.
2014, we're still sorting it. It does take us ages. And this is the job I've got to get done. We've got, in fact, I've
Correct,
closed this
yeah.
last week, applied to Historic England to get permission to do it, because everything you do here, it's got to go to the Secretary of State's office in London.
Right.
Because so this is the mill. So imagine these as being big pestle and mortars.
I see.
So material would come in through the hatchway you've walked over there,
Yep.
loaded into a pan, water added, and then these paddles or arms push the stones of chert round
Yeah.
and do the grinding.
Yeah.
And then the floor is made up of blocks of chert like this.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's just show it. So if you look at the video, you can see
Yeah.
you can see it actually running. And then these 4 pans we run when we steam. So there's material, it's a bit dry and needs mixing up. But we do actually grind in these
They
pans.
still do that now.
We don't
Yeah,
want
no,
this,
no, yeah.
but you can see that it illustrates and gives a good sense of what it was like when it was actually working.
Yeah.
And then there are channels under the floor with sort of sluices. You can let the material out of any of the pans down, so it'd run down, because there'd be a sort of a fairly thin suspension, or we call it a slop.
Yeah.
Notice we've got
For
technical
techno
names.
terms, yeah.
There's a crane lift above there, driven off the line shafts.
Oh yeah.
And then you'll also notice around the wall the patterns, the wooden patterns that were made for casting the
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
arms, or anything, the whole mill, the gear wheels.
They've got the name Shirley on them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's just like now, if you're injection moulding, you pay for the tooling, but retain the tooling. So if you want some more making, you send it off to,
Yeah.
you'd have a choice of going to, say, 3 injection moulders, which I've done in my
Yeah.
previous existence. So you kept them, so you say, oh, that gear wheel's broke, a tooth's gone off. Can you take it down to the foundry and get one cast? Actually, in the foundry was the winter quarters of Barnum and Bailey Circus.
Right.
On the railway. Have you tried to go down here? Last week. Or how would you do it? Very nice. Because they had, on the railway side, because they used to travel about by train there, circus train, used to have winter quarters.
Yeah.
So, in fact, elephants were not an unusual sight in the fields.
Right.
And in fact, there's a local magician circus act called the Van Burens. You've probably never heard of it.
No, we haven't.
Well, it was the old man, old Mr. Van Buren, who went in mid-80s towards 90 now, and his son still carries on the act. His son's supposed to be one of the best plate spinners and monocycle riders in the world.
Right.
And the son's wife, for the moment, these are the drawer holes for the pans. So you'd shovel it out, probably take it in the yard for washing, get the ash out, then upstairs. This equipment is a crusher, and you need to crush some material, such as corny stone. You don't calcine it, but you crush it. And so it's just driven by probably 1880s engine, and it's just a jaw crusher, which I'll show you on the video working, for reducing the size of material. And it was fed through the wall. So you can imagine all your deliveries in and out. Now, when you come downstairs, it wasn't built like that. It was built level with the canal. But the whole Stoke-on-Trent's gone down about 2 metres.
Is it dropped?
Now, if you look in some of the locks, you see with the summit lock, you can see the original capstones and where the lock's then been built up. And the planet lock was put in extra. Because the whole area's gone down.
Gone down, yeah.
Because we've been digging coal now.
Oh, is that why? I was thinking, what? I see, yeah. 'Cause I suppose it's all hollow underneath, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's gradually sinking.
Yeah.
It isn't sinking much now. This is our sorry, here.
What room?
Here.
Deer room.
Gear.
Gear
You'd
room.
never guess why, would you?
There's hundreds of gears. Look at it, wow.
So, 3 purposes. Take the calcine material upstairs to grind. When it's been ground, it would come down the chute called a launder into a wash tub. So it's just like a blender, taking lumps out and mixing it up. Then you'd run it off into a tank called a settling arc,
Yeah.
and they're just like little snow domes when you're a little girl. It
Yeah.
settles.
Yeah.
So you can then, there's a plate on the end with bungs in, with holes down, so you can run the water off gradually. Then you've got this thick suspension or slop, which could be delivered to the customer, but you wouldn't want to pay these canal boat people for shipping water a good way. So if it was going a good way, they would dry in bed the other side of the wall. But if it was locally, you'd send it hydrated.
Yeah.
Then the engine to the other side, so that drives the 2 rim gears, drives the line shafts through the bevel gears upstairs. The building is a cast iron frame, mid-Victorian building.
Right.
And if you look at the video, you've seen some of it, but you can see it. So you've been into the kiln. Okay. Now there's a little engine going with the crusher, and it will show you the guy. I think he's using coal because it shows up, but it doesn't matter. So there's your jaw crusher. These jaw crushers are used everywhere. And there the bevel gears going around. Stuff coming into the lawn there. There's the wash tub inside, into the settling arc, and back to our ladies. And I've got an application for you, Julianne, when you leave. I think she's a model. She looks too posh to be a stone picker to me. Even the horse looks posh. And on these were postcards, by the way. So if you were posh on holiday in Normandy, you could say, you know, dear Mum, watching these ladies stone picking on the beach. Weather very nice.
Yeah.
Wine great. See you next week. Love, Julianne. Okay.
Yeah.
So we, turn right Liverpool, turn left home. And And of course, as you went on, you could get down towards Birmingham and go up to London or Bristol.
Yeah.
This is what we want. See how it's going all up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We've got to get something done.
Okay, so
Right, so when this was running, it was a Cornish design boiler, probably a bit bigger in diameter and certainly longer than this. Boilers wear out, so when it was last running commercially, it was a Lancashire boiler, which means it got 2 stoke holes. Managed to get in?
Yeah.
Well done. After it closed in 72, before it was scheduled, they were putting some new equipment in, and because it stuck out, they cut the end off the boiler, which made it slightly leaky on steam, as you can imagine. So when the lads were restoring this, they needed a boiler. This boiler was built literally half a mile down the road in Cliff Vale,
Yeah.
you know, because it says on,
Oh, yeah, so good.
Well,
in 1903. So in its own right, it's a piece of important piece of Stoke-on-Trent industrial archaeology. So it was brought here, installed, and although it wouldn't be big enough if we were going full blast production, it's more than good enough for us to run the mill on for demonstrations and
Yeah.
over the weekend. So basically it's a Cornish design, I mean it's one boiler, one fire tube. You've already had a look. You
Yeah.
can see the little wall is where to the grate, so that's where the fire's to.
Yeah.
And you can see goes right back. Can you see the end of the boiler?
Yeah.
yeah.
Just
Okay.
about, yeah.
So the boiler gases, or the flue gases, go to the back of the boiler, they come underneath, then out to the sides and down the sides, which gives some chance for to exchange the heat. The 2,500 gallons, 12,500 litres roughly, of water. So water is up to here, and steam would be generated here, 2 pressure gauges, and then that's the safety valve on top, the thing with the rings on, set at 60 psi, 4 atmospheres. So if it gets a bit over enthusiastic, it wouldn't blow up. Water's fed down from the water tank, which would at one time probably been fed from the canal. But canal, using feed water from canals caused more boiler explosions and deaths than anything.
Why? Is that because of the rubbish in it?
Yeah, people, especially in Manchester, started to put dye stuffs in it and became acidic.
Oh, right.
So you're putting mild sulfuric acid in your boiler,
Yeah.
then boiling the sulfuric acid. There's nothing worse. So instead of having a 3/8 boiler plate, you'd be down to a 16th, then suddenly you'd be other than the canal in bits. Would be steam pumps. That's the damper, so you can vary the amount of air going through as you're trying to keep the heat steady and have it generating steady steam.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And it takes 5 days to warm it,
Does he?
and it'll generate sufficient steam. So we light it on the Monday
For the weekend.
for the weekend.
Yeah.
So that's why we don't suddenly say, oh, we'll steam for you. Because then, well, can you steam for us tomorrow? I say, no. And of course now it's
The engine house. Very
so
nice.
This is 1920s beam engine, bought second hand, built by Bateman and Sherritt in Salford, Manchester, brought down by canal from Eccles, where we believe it was in a cotton mill, but that's a bit of a guess. So steam comes in through the main steam valve from next door, through another valve we'll come back to, into the steam chest. The black cylinder, just one cylinder, piston inside, connected to the shiny rod at the back, piston rod, connected to the beam, swings the beam, turns the crank, turns the flywheel, and turns the machinery. Now, it's a bit more complicated than that. So, coming to the detail of it, first of all, when this engine was built, boiler technology wasn't good enough to give you high pressure steam. So if we go back to the 1730s, the Newcomen engines, which were pumping engines only, open cylinder, piston rod connected by a chain to the beam. The other end would be a pump, say down a mine shaft, and the weight of that pump rod would pull the beam down, so it pulled the piston up. As it came up, you'd introduce steam, low pressure. Close the valve, spray cold water in. The steam condenses. That gives you a
Combustion.
vacuum.
In vacuum.
So it's actually atmospheric pressure that gives you your power stroke, not steam pressure. Now, this is slightly more complicated, but it's using partly that and partly steam pressure. It's double acting, push-pull, so it's a sealed piston rod, sealed at the top, but just the same, as the piston comes up, put steam in, but instead of actually saying water in, you expose the atmosphere to a cold atmosphere of the condenser under the floor.
Yeah,
And that was James Watt's first patent.
yeah.
We keep the condenser cold by running canal water through. And then, so that condenses, but you also put then steam pressure on top, and it's got atmospheric pressure on top. So it's two pressures moving the piston each time. So it's a lot more sophisticated. And that improves the efficiency hugely. And then, because you've got to push as well as pull, you can't push with a piece of chain. So you've got the parallel motion on top, which turns arc motion into vertical motion, which is James Watt's second patent,
Yeah.
which is very clever. It's like a parallelogram
Yeah.
modified.
Yeah.
And then, when you drive this, you drive it through a ratchet for two reasons. First of all, if you stop the engine at the top or bottom dead centre, it won't start. You have to bar it round, and you never bar it against the weight of the mill, so you can bar it backwards. Or if you're timing the engine, rather than disconnecting everything, you can actually alter the position manually. And then we've got the governor, or as I tell the kids, cruise control.
Yeah.
So that spins round, the balls go out, that motion then is transmitted to the second valve to ultimately meant to steam going in, so that's your speed control. And one massive advantage of a steam engine over a water wheel is you can control the speed much more accurately and run 24/7, which gives you a better grind. So a better raw material gives you a better quality pottery and cuts your losses. Right, the two gauges, one's vacuum, the other's steam pressure. And if you look at the video, you can see, if you want to see the full video, it's in the business essentially.
Ah, there's the balls. Yeah, it's spinning.
See the balls throwing out the governor. I think a chap named Picard invented it and James Watt nicked it. There's the parallel motion. So actually it's quite sophisticated for 1820.
Yeah.
We believe it's one of the oldest engines still working and driving original machinery, rotative engines.
Yeah. I feel like we should make more of a song and dance about it, really, because
We
it's
should.
so unique. isn't it?
We don't make any song and dance. And I say we, all of us.
Yeah.
Council, Canals and Rivers Trust, the citizens of Stoke-on-Trent, the country.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't know, it's just not. And
Do you
there's
think
no
it's a
folks
Stoke
in it,
thing?
isn't it? Yeah,
Funny thing to say, isn't it, about a load of machinery?
no, it is.
Yeah, it is.
Even the king was, especially when Tony wore his MB on his overall.
He won't be able to come anymore, will he, now he's a king?
No, you have to behave yourself.
Come Liverpool.
You can't come and, well, he was going to Middleport, because they took him up, you know, from here. Remember Andrew Watts?
On the boat.
Yeah.
One of the problems is the mill's always been run by volunteers. The City Council did employ staff to run the visitor centre with the tea room, front of house, but the knowledge about how the mill works resided with volunteers. But for the last 12 years, we've run the front of house, marketing, history side, interpretation with volunteers. The problem is, as mentioned before, some of the volunteers started in 1978. There's too many of us in our 70s. I mean, young Tim we put on the boiler because he's only 62. But the thing is, we will not be doing this. When we cleaned the boiler last time, when we had to strip the bricks, we got the youngsters on top, the 60-year-olds, and the three of us taking the bricks off them, dressing the bricks, and then carting all the rubbish out. We're all 70. And we said, well, we'll be doing this in 10 years. Of course we will. Well, in reality, will we? So in fact, we need younger volunteers to come in, especially in perhaps the 55-60 year age group. We do get people coming in perhaps in the teens, 20s, but then of course they have careers, they get married, they raise families, they're doing other things. And we are missing this cohort of the 55 to 60-year-olds. But the problem is that this demographic now, that people are not retiring.
You're living longer, working
They're
longer.
working longer because pensions have changed.
Yeah.
And if they retire in the late 60s, they don't really want to devote 10 years to volunteering. But it is a gap. All voluntary organisations of this type are suffering from the same. We have meeting after meeting, grumble about it, but very difficult to know what to do about it. And you're quite right. And the other thing is, a lot of the people now involved have worked in engineering. All right, I was electronics engineering and physics, but it gives you the background. We haven't got those cohorts now coming through who've worked in real engineering and frankly like getting the hands dirty.
Yeah.
And it is a problem, and I don't know what the future is because the cost of employment is significant. And perhaps there isn't a future for this sort of working mill, and they'll all become just static museum pieces.
Such a shame.
That was a shame, isn't it?
Oh.
Finished. Brilliant, well done.
An amazing day out here learning about this wonderful space. So if you haven't been, come and find out.
Hello, you're back.
Yeah, I spoke, he got the radio for me, they'll just do it
Okay.
yeah,